My friends, tonight I invite you to journey inward, beyond the veil of appearances, to that sacred place where all things are conceived, your own wonderful imagination. For it is not the world that molds your life, but the silent, unseen forces of belief and expectation that shape the contours of your reality. You see, the outer world is nothing more than a mirror, faithfully reflecting back the inner arrangement of your thoughts and convictions. Change your assumption, and you change the world you walk through. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. And reality will reconfigure itself to match the image held in the mind and felt in the heart. There is no power outside of you determining your fate. You are the operant power. As you believe, so shall it be done unto you. Tonight let us uncover these hidden laws and awaken to the truth that what we expect with conviction, we create with certainty. You said, write 7 key points of this speech. Just name. ChatGPT said, sure. Here are 7 key points of the speech titled The Unseen Forces of Belief and Expectation. The world is a mirror of inner belief. Imagination is the creative power. Assumption precedes manifestations. Manifestations, expectation as a silent command. The law of consciousness in action. Feeling is the secret to reality. You are the operant power. You said, long explain point 1. Without headings up to 800 words, without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, the world you see around you, the events you encounter, the people you meet, the circumstances that shape your days, these are not random, disconnected phenomena. They are reflections like images cast upon a mirror, born not from the external but from the internal structure of your own beliefs. To understand this is to begin seeing life not as a sequence of cause and effect rooted in the material world, but as a living echo of consciousness itself. The experiences you face are not imposed upon you by fate, chance, or the will of others. They arise from the assumptions you carry within, often unnoticed yet profoundly active. When one holds a belief, whether it is empowering or limiting, that belief becomes the blueprint by which reality is formed. These beliefs operate beneath the surface of the mind, often cloaked in familiarity, shaping perception in such a way that one begins to see only what aligns with those internal convictions. If, for example, you believe the world is hostile, your mind will filter every encounter through that expectation, interpreting even neutral actions as confirmation of that hostility. Likewise, if you hold the belief that life is generous, your eyes will be drawn to its blessings, and your actions will naturally lead you into situations that reinforce that view. It is not the outer world that must change first. It is the inner attitude. The outer world bends in response to the dominant beliefs held within consciousness. This bending is not always immediate, but it is certain. The moment you assume something to be true, even without physical proof, the world begins to move, subtly at first, aligning itself to deliver that which has been accepted as real. The change in belief acts as a silent signal sent out into the field of experience, and the world, being nothing but a reflection, responds with matching form. This process is often misunderstood because it appears to defy logic. The world teaches that action is the primary means of change, that effort and struggle are the paths to success, and that circumstances are fixed until physically altered. But beneath the physical layer lies a deeper structure, consciousness itself. That which you accept as true within yourself, regardless of appearances, becomes the seed that grows into form. The outer world is clay, shaped not by your hands but by your inner conviction. And once you recognize this, you no longer need to wrestle with conditions or force outcomes. You begin instead to turn inward, to examine the beliefs you carry, to notice what you consistently expect and assume, and to shift these quiet forces into alignment with the reality you desire. The mirror cannot change its image until the person before it changes their expression. The same is true for life. To demand a different outer world without changing the inner state is like pleading with a reflection to smile while frowning into the glass. It cannot be done. But once the inner expression changes, once you embody the belief in a new possibility, the mirror has no choice but to reflect that shift. The change may not come instantly, but it is inevitable. For belief impresses itself upon the subconscious, and the subconscious knows no difference between truth and falsehood. It simply accepts what is given to it and brings it forth. Most people are unaware of the power of their beliefs because they do not observe their thoughts or feelings with clarity. They believe they are reacting to the world, when in truth they are projecting it. A man who believes he is unworthy may enter a room and see only rejection, even if none exists. He may act in ways that invite dismissal, confirming his belief. Another who holds the assumption of worth may walk into the same room and command respect without demanding it. The difference is not in the world, but in the belief. This unseen force silently orchestrates behavior, perception, and outcome. When the idea that the world is a mirror is truly grasped, life becomes an entirely different experience. Responsibility shifts inward. One no longer feels like a victim of outer events, but a participant in a living dream shaped by thought and feeling. This does not mean blame, it means power. It means the ability to revise, to imagine anew, and to allow those imaginings to replace the old assumptions that have outlived their purpose. The moment you see that what you consistently believe is what you consistently experience, you step out of the illusion of powerlessness and into the awareness of your creative nature. This inner architecture of belief is not confined to the intellect. It resides in feeling. A belief is not just a thought repeated. It is a feeling accepted as truth. One may say 1,000 affirmations, but if the feeling of the belief contradicts the words, the feeling wins. The subconscious listens not to words but to the emotional charge behind them. This is why assumptions, those quiet inner positions we take for granted, are so powerful. They are not loudly declared but deeply felt. They operate in the background, generating experiences that seem to emerge from the world, but which in fact originate in consciousness. Your entire world, your relationships, your health, your finances, your opportunities, is a reflection of your internal configuration. To change the outer, change the inner. This is not wishful thinking or fantasy, it is law. The law that the world reflects belief is not something to be argued or accepted blindly. It is something to be tested. And when it is tested, when a new belief is assumed and reality shifts in response, even in the smallest way, the truth of it begins to unfold. The world will never outpicture what you have not first accepted within. It may seem to do so, but only because unconscious beliefs are often so familiar, so deeply woven into identity, that their effect feels like fate. You said, long explain point 2 without headings up to 800 words, without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, imagination is not merely a faculty of the mind reserved for artists, children, or dreamers. It is the creative power itself, the divine instrument through which all things are made visible in the world of form. Everything that exists, everything that has ever been built, written, spoken, or lived, first began as an image held within consciousness. Before it was seen by the eye, it was seen within. Imagination is the womb of reality, the invisible substance out of which all visible things are born. To understand the power of imagination is to understand the foundation of creation itself, for nothing can exist in your world unless it first exists in you. When one imagines, they are not indulging in fantasy, but participating in the most sacred of acts, the act of creation. The images you entertain, the scenes you play in the mind, the inner conversations you repeat, they are not idle, they are seeds. Unlike seeds, they do not stay buried forever. They grow, often silently and imperceptibly, until the day they break the surface and appear as events, conditions, or experiences. You may not remember the moment you planted them, but they were planted all the same, and the law of life ensures their expression. Imagination is not passive, it is directive. Whatever is impressed upon the imagination with feeling, with belief, begins to move into form. It is not bound by time, space, or logic. It does not concern itself with the question of how. The rational mind may object, may say something is impossible, but the imagination does not argue, it creates. It takes the shape of the dominant images it is fed, and the world, being an obedient reflection, adjusts itself accordingly. You may not notice the movement, because it is not always dramatic or instant, but it is constant. Just as water follows the path carved by gravity, life flows along the channels formed by imagination. Most people use imagination unconsciously. They imagine worst-case scenarios, play scenes of lack, conflict, or rejection, and then wonder why life delivers what it does. They believe they are responding to life, when in truth they are rehearsing it in advance through their imagination. The world is not the starting point, it is the echo. Imagination is the source. To imagine vividly and persistently is to impress the subconscious with a pattern that must express. You are not simply hoping or wishing. You are forming reality at its root level. The inner image is the mold, and the outer world must take its shape. Imagination has no limits except those imposed by belief. If you can imagine it and feel it as real, you are sowing the seed of its fulfillment. There is no need to force or strive. The work is inward. It requires attention, clarity, and faith, not in the world, but in your ability to create through inner vision. What you see in your imagination is far more important than what you see with your eyes, For what you see inwardly will eventually determine what you see outwardly. If you live in the vision of what is not yet seen, and dwell in that state as though it were already true, the outer will conform. The key is to imagine not just with thought, but with feeling. It is feeling that gives life to the image. A cold, mechanical visualization is weak and ineffective. But an image charged with emotion, believed in and revisited with expectancy, has the power to move mountains. You are not simply watching a movie in your mind. You are stepping into it. You are becoming it. The more real it feels, the more certain its appearance in the world. Reality is not created by willpower or struggle, but by entering into the feeling of the fulfilled desire and allowing imagination to do its silent work. Imagination also reveals the truth of identity. You become what you imagine yourself to be. If you imagine yourself as powerless, your life will echo that belief. If you imagine yourself as capable, loved, successful, whole, the world must present you with experiences that confirm that assumption. You do not need anyone's permission to change who you are inwardly. You simply need to choose a new image, dwell in it, and let the outer world catch up. You are not bound by the story you have lived thus far. You are not defined by the evidence of the senses or the opinions of others. You are always free to imagine anew. Every great change, every transformation in life begins with an act of imagination. No invention was born without it. No progress made without someone first seeing what could be, instead of only what is. And this same creative force that built civilizations lives in each individual. It is not reserved for a few. It is the heritage of all. Though most have forgotten, to awaken it is to reclaim your role as creator, to cease reacting and begin originating. The life you desire is not something to chase, but something to imagine. And what is imagined persistently and felt deeply must come to pass. Through imagination you enter into states. Each state has its own reality, its own circumstances, its own world. You are always in a state, whether chosen consciously or not. If you do not choose, the world will choose for you based on habit and history. But if you deliberately imagine the state you desire and assume its feeling, you enter it, and having entered it, you will begin to see its fruits. This is not theory, it is law. You do not need to know how it will unfold. You need only dwell in the end, in the completed desire, and let imagination fulfill its function. The world will reconfigure itself to match the inner scene. You said, long explain point 3, without headings up to 800 words, without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, assumption is the act of taking something as true, not because of evidence in the outer world, but because it has been accepted and believed within. It is a quiet, powerful force that precedes all manifestation. Every event, every condition in life, every relationship, success or failure, is preceded by an assumption. Sometimes conscious, often unconscious. To assume is to claim internally, to occupy the state of the thing desired before it appears. It is not a matter of hoping or waiting, but of knowing and accepting that what is imagined is already a fact in the unseen. The outer world does not initiate change, it reflects the changes that have already occurred in the inner realm of assumption. Once an assumption is held with persistence and emotional acceptance, it hardens into fact, taking shape in time and space as a lived experience. People are conditioned to believe that seeing is believing, that only after something appears in the physical can it be accepted as true. But this is the great reversal of spiritual law. In truth, believing is seeing. What is assumed to be true becomes the lens through which the world is interpreted. And more than that, it becomes the structure by which the world is constructed. The inner assumption does not simply color perception, it gives rise to experience. If a person assumes they are not good enough, no matter what opportunities appear, they will find ways to sabotage or overlook them. If they assume they are favored, loved, and successful, the world will mirror that inner state, even if it must rearrange circumstances and shift people to do so. Assumption requires a willingness to feel now what the senses deny. It demands that one turn away from appearances, not with denial but with quiet authority. It is not a matter of pretending or escaping reality, but of recognizing that reality flows from consciousness. When one assumes the feeling of the wish fulfilled, they move into the state of that fulfilled desire, and that state begins to attract and organize everything necessary for its expression. Circumstances, opportunities, and people begin to align with the new inner position. The assumption acts as a magnetic center, pulling experience toward it in ways the rational mind cannot predict. To assume a new state is to accept it so fully that one thinks from it rather than of it. Most people think of their desires as something separate and far away, but to assume is to live from the end, to mentally dwell in the place where the desire is already realized. This shift is subtle but crucial. When you assume you are already the person you desire to be, your thoughts, feelings, and actions begin to match that identity. You stop waiting for change and begin living it. The external has no choice but to comply because it is compelled to mirror the dominant state of consciousness. Persistence in assumption is key. It is not enough to assume for a moment and then return to doubt or worry. The state must be occupied repeatedly until it becomes natural. This is not forceful repetition but inner conviction. The more you return to the feeling of the fulfilled desire, the more it becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes real. It is through dwelling in the assumption that it takes root in the subconscious mind, and the subconscious, having no will of its own, must express what is impressed upon it. The outer world bends to the inner pattern with perfect fidelity. There is no need to beg or struggle. Assumption is not about forcing the world to conform, but about knowing that it already has. The moment you assume something to be true, you claim it in the invisible, and that claim begins to materialize. You do not have to figure out the details. Life arranges itself around your inner state. Unexpected means, unknown channels, strange coincidences, all are used by the law to fulfill what has been assumed. It is not your job to control the how. It is your job to remain in the feeling of the end. The power of assumption is not limited to the self. You can assume for others, and if your assumption is sustained and felt with love, it will affect them, for we are all connected in consciousness. When you assume someone is healed, successful, or at peace, and you hold to that vision without contradiction, you are contributing to the change of their state. You are seeing them not as they are, but as they could be, and in that seeing you help bring it into being. This is the true meaning of prayer, not begging for change, but assuming the change is already done. There is a sacredness to assumption, for it is an act of faith. Not in some distant power, but in the creative law that lives within. It is a declaration that imagination creates reality, and that by dwelling in a new state of being, one can bring forth what was once only an inner vision. The world does not grant desires through effort or merit. It yields to assumption. To those who dare to believe before seeing, to those who live in the conviction of the invisible, the visible must eventually comply. This is not superstition or fantasy. It is the quiet mechanism by which all things are made. To assume is to begin creation. To sustain the assumption is to allow that creation to unfold. You said, long explain point 4 without headings up to 800 words, without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, expectation operates as a silent but commanding force in the shaping of reality. It is not loud or dramatic, yet it carries within it the full weight of creative authority. What you expect, whether consciously or unconsciously, sends out a signal into the field of life, a blueprint around which experience gathers and organizes. Expectation is not simply hope, it is belief in motion. It is the quiet conviction that something will happen, that a certain outcome is on its way, and this inner stance held with consistency begins to bend the outer world to match it. While belief forms the foundation, expectation builds upon it, adding energy, momentum, and direction. There is a subtle but crucial distinction between desire and expectation. Many desire change, but few expect it. Desire often remains in the realm of longing, accompanied by doubt, worry, or feelings of unworthiness. Expectation, on the other hand, is desire matured into certainty. It no longer pleads, it knows. It assumes the outcome not as a possibility, but as a natural inevitability. This internal state influences perception, thought, behavior, and ultimately the unfolding of circumstances. When one truly expects something, every action taken, every choice made, becomes an unconscious alignment with that expected result. Expectation works through the subconscious mind. The subconscious does not question or reason. It accepts the dominant emotional impressions given to it, and acts upon them. If one habitually expects failure, rejection, or disappointment, those expectations take root and begin to manifest through repeated patterns and experiences. Not because life is against the individual, but because life is always echoing the signals sent out by the inner state. On the contrary, when someone expects success, fulfillment, and ease, not in arrogance but in quiet certainty, the subconscious begins to move circumstances, people, and events in harmony with that expectation. What is impressed inwardly must express outwardly. This is why people so often find that their fears seem to come true. Fear is not just an emotion, it is often a form of negative expectation. When one anticipates disaster, betrayal, loss, or limitation with strong emotion, they are unknowingly planting the seeds for those outcomes. The mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined fear and a real event. It treats both as commands. The more energy and focus given to a particular outcome, the more the subconscious organizes the body, behavior, and perception to align with it. It draws attention to confirming evidence and filters out anything that would contradict the expected result. The nature of expectation also determines how one responds to delays or apparent obstacles. A person who truly expects their desire to manifest does not waver when things do not appear immediately. Their expectation is rooted not in external evidence but in inner knowing. They are not disturbed by appearances because they understand that appearances are temporary reflections of past assumptions and expectations. They persist, not because they are desperate, but because they have already accepted the outcome within themselves. They live as though it were done. Their trust in the unseen is stronger than their reaction to the seen. Expectation is a posture, a stance of consciousness that can be cultivated. It begins with the decision to align inner dialogue, emotion, and imagination with the end result. Every time one entertains thoughts of doubt, they are weakening the structure of their expectation. But each time they return to the feeling of fulfillment, each time they affirm that what they seek is already on its way or already theirs, they are reinforcing it. Expectation is not about forcing belief, but about gently and consistently redirecting attention until certainty becomes natural. The mind begins to rewire itself to support this new stance, and over time it becomes effortless. When you expect something deeply enough, your entire being begins to operate as if it were already true. Your tone of voice changes, your posture shifts, your actions are no longer hesitant or uncertain. You speak and move with the calm authority of someone who knows what is coming. Others may sense this in you and respond accordingly. Life too senses this inner shift and delivers what matches. Expectation creates a gravitational field. It draws in its likeness and repels contradiction. It does not need to scream or struggle. It simply is. And because it is, the world responds. Children often demonstrate this principle naturally. When they expect a gift, a visit, or a joyful event, they act with such innocence and certainty that the whole household often moves to fulfill that expectation. Their belief is undiluted by fear or analysis. They simply assume the good is coming and prepare their hearts and minds to receive it. This is the same spirit that one must carry into the creative process. To expect with the innocence of a child and the confidence of one who knows the laws of consciousness is to place oneself in the stream of manifestation, where outcomes unfold with grace. This principle of expectation applies to all areas of life: relationships, health, finances, career, self-image. If you expect love, you will radiate the qualities that draw it. If you expect healing, your body responds more rapidly to that command. If you expect increase and opportunity, your attention sharpens to recognize and act on doors opening. Nothing happens in isolation. Expectation reshapes the inner environment, and the outer world follows. This does not mean that challenges will never appear, but it means that even challenges are interpreted differently through the lens of faith. They are seen as temporary conditions, not permanent realities. The one who expects good is already aligned with the outcome, and that alignment creates the pathway. You said, long explain point 5 without headings up to 800 words, without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, inner conversation is the continuous, often unnoticed stream of dialogue that flows through the mind throughout every moment of the day. It is not limited to words spoken aloud, but includes the silent thoughts, assumptions, judgments, and commentaries that one holds about themselves, others, and the world. These internal dialogues are not mere mental noise or passive background chatter. They are formative, generative, and profoundly creative. Each inner word sown with belief and emotion is a seed, and every seed planted in the fertile ground of the subconscious mind must eventually bear fruit in the external experience. The tone and content of these inner conversations shape perception, decision-making, relationships, opportunities, and the unfolding of one's reality. Most people are unaware of the power carried within their habitual inner talk. They speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to others, repeating phrases of limitation, doubt, fear, and unworthiness, often without challenge. These inner words, repeated often enough, become embedded assumptions that dictate the range of what one believes is possible. If someone repeatedly tells themselves, I'm not good enough, or nothing ever works out for me, they are etching those beliefs into their subconscious, and from that internal script, life must respond with confirming evidence. The world simply mirrors the identity held in these inner conversations. The act of observing and redirecting inner speech is one of the most powerful spiritual disciplines. It requires awareness, honesty, and intention. The moment one becomes conscious of their internal dialogue is the moment they reclaim the authorship of their experience. Inner conversation can be seen as the steering wheel of the mind. It guides attention, emotion, and ultimately action. A thought may come uninvited, but entertaining it, giving it voice and repetition within is a choice. That choice becomes habit, and that habit becomes destiny. To change one's life, one must begin by changing the inner narrative. Each time a new idea or desire is introduced, it must pass through the filter of inner conversation. If that conversation is filled with arguments against the desire, with reminders of past failures, or with beliefs in limitation, the desire is resisted and delayed. But if the inner speech aligns with the new state, affirming it, supporting it, feeling it, then the desire begins to solidify. Inner conversations are not private musings hidden in the mind. They are living forces that sculpt one's reality moment by moment. They are the blueprint from which the subconscious builds the world of form. The most effective inner speech carries the emotional tone of already having. When one speaks to themselves as though the desire has already been fulfilled, and does so consistently, they begin to enter into that state of being. The subconscious accepts repetition combined with feeling as instruction. To inwardly say everything is working in my favor, and to feel the calm certainty of that statement, plants a creative command into the depths of consciousness. The outer world will begin to move in ways, subtle and grand, to fulfill that assumption. People, events, opportunities, and even unexpected interventions are drawn to match the frequency of the sustained inner word. Inner conversations also affect how one relates to others. If someone habitually replays imagined arguments, anticipates rejection, or carries mental grievances, they are shaping the relational dynamics before a word is spoken. The subconscious responds to the dominant feeling carried about another, not just the surface words. When you mentally criticize someone or rehearse conflict, you are conditioning your mind to expect disharmony. But when you hold another in the light of peace, understanding, and goodwill, even if only inwardly, you begin to shift your relationship to them. Whether or not they consciously know it, your state influences their behavior toward you. This inner dialogue continues even in sleep, and it shapes the subconscious impressions carried into the dream state. What is repeated internally as one drifts to sleep becomes deeply impressed, for the conscious mind is quieted and the subconscious more receptive. Using this sacred window to speak the fulfilled desire, to dwell on loving, empowering inner speech is one of the most effective ways to initiate change. Instead of replaying the problems of the day or worrying about tomorrow, one can choose to enter sleep with words that affirm health, success, love, or peace. Those inner words do not fade with unconsciousness, they continue their work beneath awareness. Language, even when unspoken, carries vibration. The quality of one's inner speech determines the quality of one's emotional state. A mind filled with kind, encouraging, and purposeful inner dialogue creates a foundation of inner peace and confidence that no external condition can shake. But a mind filled with harsh self-talk, anxiety, and self-doubt produces a state of constant inner friction and fear. The outer world is never the cause, it is the mirror. And the inner conversation is the source of the reflection. Changing the script is not a matter of pretending, but of consciously choosing which thoughts are allowed to grow. One need not be perfect in this practice, only persistent. It is not about suppressing all negative thought, but about recognizing it quickly and replacing it with a more empowering word. Each time this is done, the mind becomes more attuned to the new pattern. The old conversations lose their grip, and new conversations take root. Over time, this inner transformation gives rise to outer transformation, not because of effort or willpower, but because the world must reflect the inner content that is most consistently held. Whether spoken aloud or in the silent chambers of the mind, every word is a cause, and every experience is its effect. You said, long explain point 6. Without headings up to 800 words, without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, imagination is the foundation of all creation, the original cause of everything that appears in the world of form. Before anything can exist in the physical realm, it must first be conceived in the inner world of thought and image. Imagination is not a mere escape or daydreaming, but a divine faculty, a bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the means by which one enters into the state of the wish fulfilled and gives shape to desires not yet realized. Through imagination, one is able to move beyond the boundaries of the senses and plant new realities in the field of consciousness, from which all outer circumstances eventually emerge. Every invention, every work of art, every healed body, every transformed life begins with an image, a mental picture held with feeling and belief until it becomes fact. The imagination is not limited to visual images alone. It includes the felt sense of an experience, the inner hearing of voices and sounds, the knowing that something is real even when it cannot yet be touched. It involves the total engagement of the mind in the state desired. When you imagine something vividly and dwell in that state as though it were already true, you begin to impress that reality on the subconscious mind. The subconscious does not distinguish between what is real and what is imagined with belief and emotion. It accepts the image as a blueprint and begins to move circumstances to express it. What is impressed inwardly must be expressed outwardly, and imagination is the tool by which the impression is made. Imagination is creative action. It is not idle fantasy, but deliberate construction. When you take the time to enter into the feeling of already having what you desire, whether it is peace, abundance, love, or healing, you are using imagination to clothe the invisible with substance. You are not simply watching a scene in your mind as though it was separate from you. You are entering into it, participating in it, becoming one with it. You are not an observer, but a doer. The more vividly you engage the senses of imagination, feeling the textures, hearing the sounds, seeing the colors, the more real the scene becomes to the subconscious, and the faster the outer world begins to conform. Most people use their imagination destructively without realizing it. They imagine the worst-case scenarios, rehearse arguments that never happened, replay failures, and mentally anticipate rejection or disappointment. These imaginal acts are not harmless. They are creative forces shaping the future. Every time the mind dwells in fear or doubt, it is planting seeds of those conditions. The outer world, as a perfect mirror, will eventually reflect back the emotional tone and imagery held most persistently. But when imagination is used constructively, when it is directed deliberately to picture only what is lovely, noble, and life-affirming, it becomes a sacred instrument of transformation. The body responds to it. Relationships shift because of it, and new paths open where none seemed possible. Imagination is most powerful when used with repetition and emotional conviction. One imaginal act done with deep feeling and absolute acceptance can produce great change. But when an imaginal scene is revisited again and again with the same spirit of conviction, it creates an inner momentum that becomes unstoppable. The subconscious mind is influenced not only by what is imagined, but by how often and how deeply it is imagined. Each repetition is like striking the same key on a piano. Over time, the sound becomes more familiar, more resonant, more dominant. Eventually, the tone of the new state becomes natural, and when it is natural inwardly, it must become normal outwardly. Imagination is also the faculty by which one moves beyond time. In the imaginal act, you are not bound by the present conditions. You are not limited by the evidence of the senses. You are free to place yourself in the end state, the fulfilled desire, and to live from that end. In imagination, you can be where you want to be, do what you want to do, and receive what you want to receive. You are not waiting for change, you are embodying it. This shift from imagining about something to imagining from it is the difference between wishful thinking and true creation. When you imagine from the place of already being the person you wish to be, your inner state changes and the outer world must follow. This power of imagination is available at all times. It requires no special tools, no rituals, no permissions. It is always with you, waiting to be directed. In quiet moments of stillness before sleep, during meditation, or even in the midst of daily life, you can return again and again to the imaginal scene that represents the fulfillment of your desire. You can revise past experiences in imagination, and thereby change their emotional charge and future consequences. You can pre-live tomorrow in imagination and set the tone for what will unfold. The law of consciousness operates through what is impressed upon it, and imagination is the sacred means of impression. When imagination is trusted, it becomes the most intimate companion and the most powerful tool. It allows one to transcend appearances, to rise above limitation, and to participate in the ongoing act of creation. To live imaginatively is to live in faith, to walk by the unseen rather than by what the senses report. It is to know that the world outside is always catching up with the world within, and that every vision lovingly and persistently held in imagination is a seed destined to bloom in its own time. You said, long explain point 7 without headings up to 800 words without concluding sentences. ChatGPT said, persistence is the quiet, unwavering force that ensures the fulfillment of one's inner vision, regardless of appearances or delays. It is not dramatic or forceful, but it is steady, loyal, and unshaken. While imagination, belief, expectation, and inner speech form the structure of creative power, it is persistence that maintains that structure long enough for it to express into form. Without persistence, even the most beautiful vision may fade into nothingness. It is through persistence that one continues to occupy the state of the wish fulfilled despite circumstances that seem to contradict it. The world outside may not yet reflect the imagined desire, but the persistent individual continues to feel from the end, to live inwardly as if it were already so, knowing that sustained inner conviction always precedes outer change. The nature of reality is such that change often unfolds gradually, through processes that involve movement, timing, and the reshaping of events, people, and environments. When someone plants a seed in the soil, they do not dig it up each day to see if it has grown. They trust that beneath the surface invisible processes are at work, responding to light, moisture, and time. Persistence is this same trust applied to the unseen workings of consciousness. It is the refusal to abandon the inner state simply because the outer senses have not yet confirmed it. The persistent mind does not seek constant reassurance from the outer world, because it understands that the outer is a lagging reflection of the inner, and that persistence bridges the gap between the imagined and the material. Persistence does not involve strain or struggle. It is not about trying harder or doing more in the physical world. It is about inner loyalty, a daily return to the assumption that what is desired is already true. It is the practice of returning to the imaginal scene, re-entering the feeling of fulfillment, even when doubts whisper and evidence argues otherwise. The persistent individual knows that doubt is a test of devotion, not a sign of failure. They do not fight doubt, but gently ignore it, choosing again and again to dwell in the desired state. This repetition of inner acceptance carves new grooves in the mind, turning belief into assumption, and assumption into embodiment. Those who succeed in any field of life, whether in healing, relationships, success, or transformation, do so not necessarily because they have stronger imagination or deeper knowledge, but because they persist. They continue to see themselves as healthy even when symptoms remain. They continue to imagine abundance even when the account is low. They continue to dwell in love even when the relationship is not yet visible. This refusal to surrender the inner vision to the outer evidence is what turns dreams into fact. The outer world is malleable and always in motion, and persistence is what holds the mold in place until the new shape emerges. Persistence must also extend into the subtleties of inner speech and feeling. It is not enough to affirm a vision in the morning and then spend the rest of the day rehearsing worry and fear. True persistence is an hourly commitment to remain faithful to the end result, even if only in gentle reminders and small returns. It is not rigid or harsh, but loving and attentive. Each time the mind begins to drift toward doubt, the persistent individual brings it back, not with punishment, but with tenderness, as one would guide a child back to a path. The mind, through this practice, becomes obedient to the vision, and the vision begins to feel more natural than the current condition. Persistence transforms the invisible into the inevitable. When a new state is persistently assumed, it begins to feel normal, and what feels normal inwardly begins to appear outwardly as circumstance. This is the secret of all true transformation, that the outer changes not because one demands it, but because one becomes someone for whom the new condition is natural. Persistence re-educates the subconscious mind through saturation. The old beliefs and patterns are not fought but dissolved through lack of attention, while the new state is built up through constant, faithful recognition. Over time, the energy of persistence wears down resistance and opens the path for manifestation to flow. Even the act of imagining itself requires persistence. The mind may wander, the attention may flicker, distractions may arise, but the persistent individual returns. Over and over, they revisit the scene, the feeling, the assumption, until it becomes alive and animated within. They no longer wait for the world to give them permission to feel it. They feel it now, in imagination, and allow the world to rearrange itself accordingly. This inner insistence, calmly held and gently repeated, creates the momentum that carries desire into form. It is not about force but about consistency. Each return to the vision reinforces it, strengthens it, anchors it more deeply in the subconscious, where all change begins. Persistence does not demand perfection. It allows space for temporary discouragement, for emotional fluctuations, for moments of forgetting. But it always returns. It remembers its aim and reclaims its posture. The persistent person is not the one who never doubts, but the one who chooses not to stay in doubt. They are not immune to setbacks, but unwilling to be defined by them. They know that the truth of imagination is more real than appearances, and they commit to that truth even when appearances challenge it. They may revise, reimagine, reinforce, but they never abandon the state they have chosen. That is the power of persistence. It holds the inner ground long enough for the outer to catch up. Persistence is the quiet agreement with unseen laws, the daily choice to remain faithful to the invisible over the visible. It is the embodiment of trust in the unseen workings of consciousness, the loyal return to the assumption that what is felt and imagined is already true in its essence. This unwavering stance creates the container through which reality must pass, and through that container the desired experience flows, not as a reward but as a reflection of the state most consistently assumed. You said, right conclusion of this speech. ChatGPT said, so let us remember, reality bends not to the noise of effort, but to the quiet certainty of belief. It is not action but assumption that moves the unseen forces. When we choose to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, when we shape our inner conversations with love, when we persist in imagination despite appearances, we align ourselves with the deeper current from which all life flows. The world is not separate from us, it is our mirror, our servant, our response. And so we do not need to strive, we need only to assume and to remain faithful to that assumption. In that inner faithfulness, the invisible becomes visible, the imagined becomes real, and the unseen forces respond with perfect precision. Tonight I invite you to journey inward, beyond appearances, beyond circumstance, into the eternal workshop of creation, your own consciousness, for nothing happens by chance. Every event, every encounter, every unfolding of your world is the externalization of an inner state. It is not fate nor fortune, but feeling that molds the clay of life, as within, so without. We are not here to plead with powers outside of ourselves, but to awaken to the truth that the Creator and the creation are one, found within the human imagination. It is there in the secret place that we assume the feeling of our desires fulfilled, and when that assumption hardens into fact, we call it reality. But the seed of every manifestation is sown long before its harvest, sown in the silence of your mind. Tonight you will come to see that the law which governs all creation is simple. Consciousness is the only reality. Change your inner conversation and your world must conform. Accept this truth and you will cease to live reactively. You will rise in dominion. For nothing is accidental and nothing is withheld. All is yours if you will only claim it within. Consciousness is the only reality. This idea, though radical to the reasoning mind, is the foundation of all spiritual creation and the source of every outward experience. All things, from the mundane to the miraculous, emerge from the unseen dimension of consciousness. When we speak of consciousness, we do not mean mere awareness of the physical world or the passive observation of events. We refer to the dynamic creative power that perceives, imagines, and assumes. This power, though invisible, is the first cause of everything visible. It is not reactive but causative. It does not respond to the world, it precedes it. Everything you see, hear, touch, and experience through the senses is a shadow cast by the light of your inner state. The world around you is not independent of your mind. Rather, it is sustained by the beliefs, assumptions, and feelings you hold within yourself. In this sense, the outer world is a mirror, faithfully reflecting your innermost convictions, whether you are aware of them or not. You do not observe reality objectively. You participate in its creation through the lens of your consciousness. Your life, with all its seeming coincidences, triumphs, and trials, is nothing more than the outpicturing of the states of consciousness you habitually occupy. This is not a matter of metaphysical abstraction, but a living principle. When you say I am, you are engaging with the core of your being, the eternal, formless self that chooses how to be. What you place after I am begins to define your world. Say I am rich, and if that statement is felt to be true, the world must respond to that truth. Say I am sick, and that too must externalize. The law does not judge, it does not discriminate between good or bad, right or wrong. It simply brings forth the fruit of whatever is planted in the soil of consciousness. This is why it is said that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, not merely in his thoughts but in the deep felt convictions that lie beneath surface awareness. Most people believe themselves to be at the mercy of circumstance. They accept their environment as fixed and final, forgetting that every condition is but a temporary crystallization of a former state. They observe lack, illness, conflict, and failure, and they accept these as reality, not knowing that they are only effects with causes rooted deep in consciousness. To change the effect, one must go to the cause, and the cause is always internal. Change the state of consciousness from which you view the world, and the world itself must change to reflect your new state. This principle operates whether you know it or not. Whether you consciously create or unconsciously drift, you are always creating, for consciousness never ceases to produce. Most live in a repetitive loop, reliving the same conditions, the same relationships, the same challenges, simply because they continue to occupy the same inner states. They affirm lack by identifying with it. They rehearse failure by expecting it. They confirm limitation by emotionally accepting it as true. But the moment one withdraws attention from a state and refuses to feed it with belief, it begins to wither, and a new state may be assumed. To understand that consciousness is the only reality is to take full responsibility for one's life, not in guilt or blame, but in power. This is not about forcing the outer world through effort or manipulation. It is about resting in the knowing that your being shapes your becoming. You do not need to beg, struggle, or chase, only to assume and live from the state of the wish fulfilled. When this is done sincerely and consistently, the outer must conform, for it has no choice but to obey the command of consciousness. Your present world, however limited it may seem, is not a prison but a projection. It is not an enemy but a messenger, revealing your inner assumptions. To see it as such is to regain dominion. You no longer try to fix effects, you go directly to the source, your own awareness. The senses may argue, the facts may scream the opposite, but if you persist in your inner assumption, if you remain faithful to the unseen reality you have chosen, the seen must yield to it. Reality as it is commonly understood is simply the collective agreement of consciousness at any given moment. But because consciousness is infinite and fluid, agreement can be changed. What was once true for you can become false, and what was once out of reach can become your natural condition. Creation is finished. All states exist. You do not create a new reality so much as you select it by entering into it. Every possibility already exists, but it lies dormant until activated by your consciousness. When you accept this as fact, you begin to use your mind in a new way, not to analyze or argue with the world, but to quietly and deliberately assume the feeling of the desired state. You learn to live inwardly with the outcome you desire, regardless of appearances. You realize that to believe in something unseen is not delusion. It is the highest form of intelligence, for all things seen were once unseen. This is the great secret that has been hidden in plain sight. Consciousness is not a passive observer. It is the potter's hand. Your world is the clay. To know this is to stop reacting and begin creating, not through willpower or frantic activity, but through inner alignment with the truth you choose to embody. The change must first occur in consciousness, and then and only then will it appear in form. Imagination creates reality. This truth, often dismissed as fantasy by the rational mind, is the very heart of all manifestation. Imagination is not mere daydreaming or idle thought. It is the divine act of creation itself, the sacred function of consciousness expressing its will. Every form, every condition, every event in the visible world was once imagined. Before the world was, it was imagined into being by the creative power of consciousness. To imagine a thing is to give it life, to set it in motion, to call forth the unseen into the seen. The visible is only the outpicturing of the invisible, and that invisible is imagination. When you imagine with feeling, you enter a state. That state, once assumed, begins to structure reality around it. It draws to itself all that corresponds to it. Just as a seed contains the full blueprint of the tree, so your imagined scene, when fully accepted, contains within it the pattern of its own fulfillment. You do not need to know how it will come to pass. You need only to enter the scene, dwell in it, and accept it as real. Once you do, the laws of this universe, which are orderly and unfailing, begin to reorganize themselves to reflect your assumption. The outer world bends to the inner image, for it is but its echo. Imagination is not a weak substitute for action. It is the cause behind all action. Every invention, every building, every relationship, every movement of history has first been imagined. It is the womb of creation. The artist sees his painting completed in his mind before his brush touches canvas. The architect walks through the finished structure in his imagination before the foundation is laid. The mother holding her child once imagined the life she would nurture. Even the skeptic, denying this truth, uses imagination to envision the world as random, and thus creates experiences that affirm his belief in chaos. Imagination is always at work, whether used consciously or unconsciously, and what is imagined, with conviction, must eventually take form. There is a sacred art to imagination. It begins with clarity. You must know what you want, not vaguely or in passing, but with the conviction of one who sees it clearly. Then you construct a scene, a short, vivid, sensory-rich scene, which implies the fulfillment of that desire, not the process of getting there, but the end itself. If it is love you desire, imagine a moment after the relationship is fulfilled. If it is wealth, imagine what you would do from the state of being wealthy. The key is to place yourself within the scene, not as an observer, but as a participant. You must see through your own eyes, hear through your own ears, and feel the texture of the experience as though it were real now. When you do this in stillness, especially in those moments when the mind is most receptive, such as before sleep or upon waking, you impress this image deeply upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, which does not question or argue, accepts this image as reality, and sets about arranging all necessary events to bring it to pass. You are not forcing the outcome, you are living it inwardly. And because imagination is the only creative power, the outer world has no choice but to reflect the inner scene. Most people imagine only in reaction to the senses. They see lack and imagine more lack. They feel unloved and imagine rejection. They experience delay and imagine further postponement. In doing so, they bind themselves to an endless loop of the same conditions. But those who learn to imagine from the end and not merely about the end, break that cycle. They begin to live from a state that is independent of appearances. They learn that the imagination, once accepted as truth, is more real than what the senses suggest. The senses only report past states of consciousness. Imagination reveals the future state already finished, waiting to be claimed. This is not to deny the outer world, but to reinterpret it. What you now see and touch is the result of former imaginings. To change it, you do not fight or argue with the facts. You rise above them. You enter the world of imagination and construct a new reality, one that feels natural and true. When you persist in that state, regardless of appearances, you give birth to a new expression. This is how all things come into being, not by effort alone, but by inner vision. Imagination is the bridge between the seen and the unseen. It connects the finite self to the infinite source. It is the divine faculty that allows man to create as God creates, not through toil but through vision. The stories you tell yourself in imagination become the scripts of your life. If you do not like the current scene, you must rewrite it. Not on paper but within. You must close your eyes, detach from the evidence of the senses, and enter the world as you desire it to be. You must dwell in the new story, feel it, believe it, love it until it begins to feel more natural than the one you wish to leave behind. This power is not given to a chosen few. It is the birthright of every being. You are always imagining and therefore always creating. The question is not whether imagination works, but whether you are using it wisely. You may imagine with fear or with faith, with doubt or with certainty, with resentment or with gratitude. But whatever you imagine, especially with deep feeling, will find its way into form. That is the law, and it operates with perfect precision. The universe is not responding to words, but to states of being. And the most powerful tool for entering a state is imagination. Assumption precedes manifestation. This is a law, not a theory. It is the spiritual principle by which all things come into being. Before anything is made visible, it must first be assumed as true within consciousness. The outer world, with all its seemingly random events and outcomes, is nothing more than the unfolding of inner states that were once assumed, whether consciously or unconsciously. To assume something is not to wish for it, nor to hope weakly that it might happen. To assume is to take it as already true, to accept it without question, to feel its reality so vividly that it becomes your natural state. It is an inner conviction that goes beyond thought into experience. You live from the end, not toward it. You feel the result before it appears, and because the universe is reflective, that inner assumption must manifest itself outwardly in time. Most people make the mistake of thinking that they must first see the change before they believe it. But the creative process works in reverse. You do not manifest by observing what is, but by imagining what could be, and assuming it is already so. The seen world is always a result, never a cause. It is an echo, not a voice. Therefore, to try to change the outer world without first changing the inner assumption is to work in vain. It is like trying to change your reflection in the mirror without changing your expression. The assumption must come first, and when it is persistent and dominant, the outer must conform to it. Assumption is the act of faith that bypasses logic. It disregards appearances. It sees the invisible and hears the inaudible. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are not pretending. You are aligning yourself with the reality that already exists in the unseen. All things exist now in imagination. Every outcome, every possibility, already lives in the infinite potential of consciousness. To assume one is to select it. You are not creating from nothing. You are choosing from all. By assuming it as true and living from that assumption, you call it forth into visibility. What was once invisible becomes visible because your state of consciousness made it so. This is why the law does not care about appearances or logic. It does not care if your current circumstances seem to contradict your assumption. It only responds to the feeling behind the assumption. If you persist in the assumption, the facts must eventually rearrange themselves to match. There is no room for doubt in this process. Doubt is the denial of assumption. It is the belief in what is rather than in what could be. But when assumption becomes your natural response, when it becomes automatic to think, feel, and live as though your desire were already true, then manifestation follows with precision. You may not see immediate results, but delay is not denial. Just as a seed planted in soil takes time to grow and emerge above the surface, so your assumptions take time to crystallize into form. Many abandon their assumption too quickly, swayed by sensory evidence, pulled back into the old state they wish to leave. But if you understand the law, you remain faithful to your assumption even when nothing seems to be happening. You walk by faith, not by sight. You know that the inner reality once assumed must externalize in its own perfect time and way. This principle is not limited to grand desires. It works in the smallest matters of daily life. Every interaction, every result, every chance meeting is a response to your inner state. When you assume love, you radiate it and attract it. When you assume failure, you prepare yourself for it unknowingly and draw it near. When you assume health, even in the midst of illness, you begin to shift your identity, and that shift initiates healing. It is not about denying facts, but about recognizing a higher truth, that consciousness is the only cause, and assumption is the way it operates. Children do this naturally. They assume roles and realities with complete conviction. They do not question whether it is logical to be a pirate or a queen. They simply feel it and become it. And for that moment, it is real. Adults trained by the world to rely on facts and reason lose this creative innocence. But it can be reclaimed. The ability to assume boldly without resistance is not childish, it is divine. It is the way the world is made. To live by assumption is to live creatively, not reactively. You no longer wait for the world to show you who you are. You decide who you are and let the world catch up. You do not seek proof, you provide it by the way you feel, speak, and move. Your assumption speaks louder than your words. It is the vibration you carry, the atmosphere around you. Others respond to it without even knowing why. Life arranges itself around it. The circumstances, people, and events that appear in your life are drawn to the state you occupy. And the state you occupy is determined by what you assume to be true. Assumption is the secret of effortless manifestation. It removes struggle and striving. It allows you to enter the desired state now, without waiting, without conditions. And in doing so, it sets the entire universe in motion to support that reality. You may be tempted to act, to force, to fix, but the most powerful action you can take is to remain faithful to your assumption. Let your inner world be the cause, and the outer world the effect. Let your imagined end be so alive in you that it overshadows the present facts. Let your mind and heart dwell in the outcome, not the problem. Let your assumption guide your steps, shape your speech, influence your mood. Let it become so real within that nothing in the world can shake it. Feeling is the secret. It is not enough to merely think of what you desire, or to visualize it as a distant possibility. You must feel it as though it were already true. Feeling is the lifeblood of creation, the invisible essence that animates the image held in imagination. Every thought, every assumption, every mental picture must be fused with feeling before it can take on form in the external world. The subconscious, which is the builder of your reality, responds not to words but to feelings. It does not reason, argue, or evaluate. It accepts whatever is impressed upon it through sustained emotion. To feel a thing deeply and consistently is to plant the seed of it in the fertile soil of consciousness, where it must in time blossom into experience. When you feel something to be true, regardless of your current circumstances, you align yourself with that version of reality. You may not yet see it, touch it, or hear it with the senses, but inwardly you are living from it. And because the world is a mirror, it must reflect the inner state you occupy. This is not a mechanical process, but a living one. The world responds not to what you want, but to who you are being. Who you are being is shaped by what you feel. If you feel wealthy, you begin to move, think, and act as a person who already possesses abundance. If you feel loved, you radiate that love and become magnetic to it. The feeling must come first. The manifestation follows as a natural consequence. Most people live in the opposite order. They wait for something to change in the outer world so they can feel different on the inside. They wait to receive the thing before they allow themselves to feel the joy, the peace, or the security they desire. But this is to misunderstand the law. The outer world cannot change permanently unless there is first a change within. The feeling of the wish fulfilled must be the starting point, not the end result. To dwell in that feeling, to nurture it with your attention and conviction, is to give the subconscious its instruction. And once the subconscious is impressed, it begins to orchestrate events, relationships, and circumstances to bring about what you have emotionally accepted. Feeling is not surface emotion or fleeting mood. It is the deep inner conviction that something is true. It is the sense of certainty that bypasses logic. You may not know how your desire will come to pass, and that does not matter. The how is not your concern. Your role is to feel the state is real, to rest in it, to let it become familiar. When a state feels natural to you, when you no longer try to make it happen but simply live from it, you have fully assumed it. And because feeling is the secret, that assumption must express itself outwardly in time. To cultivate the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you must learn to quiet the senses and turn inward. In the silence of imagination, you construct a scene that implies your desire is already realized. Then you enter that scene in mind and feel it as if it were happening now. You touch it, hear it, move within it, and most importantly, feel the emotions you would feel if it were actually true. This is not fantasy, it is creation. It is the deliberate use of your divine power to select the state you wish to occupy. The more vividly and consistently you feel this inner reality, the more quickly it will crystallize in form. Resistance only arises when there is a disconnect between what you desire and what you feel. If you think about a goal but continue to feel doubt, lack, or unworthiness, the subconscious takes its direction from the feeling, not the thought. It is your emotional atmosphere that determines what manifests. That is why persistent worry brings more things to worry about, while persistent gratitude brings more to be grateful for. The feeling is the prayer. It is the offering you make to the creative power within, and it is always answered according to its nature. Whatever you feel deeply and dwell upon consistently becomes your experience. You may change your feeling by changing the way you interpret life. Instead of reacting to what is, you learn to feel from what you want. You do not deny the facts, but you refuse to worship them. You allow your inner feeling to be the guide, not the outer condition. If you can sustain the feeling of success in the face of apparent failure, the outer must yield. If you can feel abundance while appearances show lack, the wealth must come. It is not a matter of pretending but of shifting identity. You become the person who already has the thing, and from that state you act, think, and feel in a new way. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the link between desire and fulfillment. It carries your intention into the deeper realms of mind where it can be acted upon. Every great achievement, every profound change begins with a feeling. It is the atmosphere in which your dream grows, the energy that draws your desire closer, the signal you send out into the universe. To master feeling is to master creation. It requires attention, patience, and persistence. But once you realize that you are not waiting on life to bring you something, but rather aligning yourself with it through feeling, you begin to live from a new place of power and certainty. Persistence in assumption creates fact. What you continually assume to be true, even in the absence of visible proof, must eventually solidify into experience. Reality is not shaped by one moment of belief or a fleeting visualization, but by sustained inner conviction. The creative power within responds to the dominant state you occupy over time, not to an occasional thought or wish. It is through repetition, consistency, and faithfulness to the assumed truth that you give it solidity and draw it into form. Every time you return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, every time you refuse to be swayed by appearances and instead reaffirm the reality of your inner state, you strengthen the foundation upon which your world is built. Each assumption is a seed, and persistence is the care and nourishment that brings the seed to bloom. The mind may wander, the senses may contradict, but the one who holds fast to their inner vision in spite of delay or denial becomes the master of creation. To persist is to remain unmoved by facts that seem to contradict your desire. It is not stubbornness or denial of what is, but the disciplined choice to dwell in what you choose to be true. The world will always test your faith in your assumption. The senses will offer evidence that seems to disprove what you have claimed inwardly. But if you continue to return to your assumption, if you live in it, breathe in it, think from it, and act from it, it must harden into fact. Most people change their assumptions too quickly. They assume abundance for a few days, then see no change and return to thoughts of lack. They imagine success but then entertain doubts when obstacles appear. They wish for love but allow rejection or silence to plant the seeds of fear. This vacillation weakens the creative process. The subconscious does not respond well to uncertainty. It accepts the message that is repeated with feeling and belief, not the one that is whispered and then withdrawn. Persistence is the proof of faith. It is the quiet confidence that your inner world is more real than the current outer circumstances. When you persist in the assumption that you already have what you desire, you begin to see subtle shifts. People treat you differently. Opportunities arise and coincidences occur that align with your inner state. These are not accidents. They are the outpicturing of the reality you have assumed. But you must not be discouraged if the results are slow or invisible at first. Just as water wears down stone, your sustained assumption impresses itself on the deeper layers of reality. The unseen world is always moving, always arranging itself in response to your persistent inner stance. This persistence must be felt, not forced. It is not about tense effort or constant repetition of affirmations. It is about returning again and again to the feeling of the wish fulfilled until it becomes your dwelling place. When your assumption becomes habitual, when it feels natural and familiar, then it has taken root. You may find yourself automatically thinking, feeling, and responding from that state without effort. This is the sign that you are no longer trying to believe but simply living the belief. The law of consciousness responds most powerfully when there is no strain, only assumption resting in confidence. Even when appearances remain unchanged, you persist not because you are trying to make something happen, but because you know that it already is. You trust the law to operate as surely as the sun rises. You do not dig up the seed to see if it's growing. You water it with your continued belief. You affirm its presence through your moods, your reactions, and your silent conversations. Each moment you choose to assume your desired state, even in the face of contradiction, you are aligning with the truth that consciousness creates reality. The outer world is always a step behind the inner world, and persistence bridges the gap. There may be moments when doubt arises, when fear seems to pull you back into an old state. But persistence is not about never feeling doubt. It is about returning again to the assumption, no matter what. You acknowledge the fear but do not surrender to it. You remind yourself that the world cannot help but reflect the dominant inner state. You persist, not through force but through choice. You make the decision to stand firm in your vision. You become the one who already has, rather than the one who is waiting to receive. Persistence is not passive. It is a quiet, steady force that reshapes reality. It is the refusal to compromise with appearances. It is the ability to feel the truth of your desire in your bones, even when the evidence says otherwise. You carry the feeling of fulfillment like a sacred fire, never letting it die. You build your world from the inside out, brick by brick, thought by thought, feeling by feeling. And eventually what was once only an idea, a hope, becomes your living experience. Through persistence and assumption, you become the cause rather than the effect. You stop reacting to the world and start shaping it. You choose your state and stay in it until it externalizes. You no longer ask when or how because you know that time and method are not your concern. You remain loyal to your vision and let the unseen intelligence handle the rest. You persist not because you are lacking but because you are sure. You persist because you know that assumption, when sustained, must become fact. Imagination is the workshop of creation, the divine faculty through which all things are brought into being. It is not mere daydreaming or idle fancy, but the primary medium through which consciousness impresses its desires upon the subconscious mind. Everything that now exists began first in imagination, whether it be a work of art, a building, a relationship, or a fortune. The unseen realm of imagination is the womb of reality, and what is vividly and persistently imagined with feeling must eventually appear in the outer world. Imagination is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the formless and the formed, the idea and its expression. Most people underestimate the power of their imagination because they have been taught to give their attention only to what they can see, touch, and measure. They trust the evidence of the senses above all else and treat imagination as fiction rather than fact. But the truth is that imagination is more real than the physical world, for it is from imagination that the physical arises. What you see with your outer eyes is the shadow of what has already taken place within. If you want to change your life, you must first change your inner imagery. You must learn to dwell in the state you desire to experience and to build it so vividly in imagination that it becomes your new reality. The subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what is imagined, if the imagined scene is vivid and emotional enough. This is why visualization is such a powerful tool, not because it tricks the mind, but because it speaks the language of the creative force within. When you imagine something clearly with detail and feeling, you are planting that experience into your subconscious as if it has already happened. And since the subconscious is the builder of your world, it will then seek to bring circumstances, people, and opportunities into your life that align with that inner image. You are not merely hoping for a better future. You are creating it in the only place it can be created, within. To use imagination effectively, you must begin by selecting a scene that implies your desire is already fulfilled. It should be a short, simple scene that you can repeat easily, and that evokes the emotional response of already having the thing you want. You then enter that scene in your mind, not as a spectator watching it unfold, but as a participant living it. You imagine with all your senses, seeing what you would see, hearing what you would hear, touching what you would touch, and most importantly, feeling what you would feel. This inner scene must feel so natural and so real that in imagination it becomes your reality. And as you continue to return to this scene, as you dwell in it night and day, it becomes your dominant state. The power of imagination is multiplied when it is practiced in a relaxed, drowsy state. Just before sleep and upon waking are powerful moments when the mind is most receptive to suggestion. In these moments, the conscious mind relaxes and the subconscious is open. If you impress your desired scene upon your imagination at this time, it sinks deeply into your subconscious where it can take root. You do not need to struggle or strive, you simply accept the reality of your desire in imagination and allow it to unfold naturally in your life. Imagination is not limited by time, space, or logic. It allows you to transcend present circumstances and live from the end, from the completed desire. It frees you from the tyranny of appearances and gives you access to a higher truth, the truth that consciousness creates reality. In imagination you can be anywhere, have anything, do anything. You are not confined to your current conditions because imagination is always greater than fact. When you live in imagination, you are stepping into the role of creator. You are no longer reacting to life, you are directing it. The key is to believe in the reality of your inner world. The more you honor your imagination, the more powerful it becomes. It begins to respond to your intention with greater clarity. Your inner visions become more vivid, and your emotional responses to them deepen. You begin to recognize that what you imagine is not separate from you. It is you in another state of being. Every imagined state is a doorway into a new version of yourself. And as you persist in imagining, you begin to embody that version. Your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors shift to match the new identity you have assumed in imagination. When doubts arise or when the outer world contradicts your inner vision, you return to imagination. You remind yourself that the senses follow. They do not lead. You reaffirm your seeing. You feel it again and you allow yourself to be nourished by the reality of the unseen. You are faithful to the world within because you know that it precedes the world without. You choose imagination over fear, vision over fact, conviction over doubt. You train your mind to live in the possibility until the possibility becomes visible. You no longer ask if your desire will manifest, because you have already seen it, felt it, lived it in imagination, and therefore you know that it must be so. Imagination is not a weak or secondary power. It is the creative center of your being, the place where all things begin. It is sacred and powerful, and it responds to your direction. When you use it consciously with feeling and faith, you become the architect of your experience. You step into alignment with the divine nature within you, the nature that calls those things which are not as though they were. You begin to experience life not as something happening to you, but as something happening through you, shaped by the images and emotions you hold within. Gratitude is the energy of fulfillment, the vibration of already having received, and the key that unlocks the doors of unseen blessings. When one lives in the spirit of gratitude, they are no longer pleading for change, but acknowledging the reality of the change that has already taken place within. It is not a reaction to something that has happened in the outer world, but a declaration that something has shifted internally. Gratitude aligns you with the frequency of your desire because it assumes that the gift is already given, the prayer already answered, the state already attained. In expressing sincere gratitude for what has not yet appeared in form, you are claiming possession of it in consciousness, and what is claimed within must in time reflect without. Gratitude is not limited to polite thanks for obvious blessings or courteous acknowledgement of favorable outcomes. True gratitude is a creative act, a mental and emotional alignment with the truth of the wish fulfilled. It is the inner posture that affirms, "This is mine. It is done. I am already that." In this way, gratitude is the evidence of faith. It does not look to the outer for confirmation. It provides its own confirmation through the felt sense of appreciation. You are not waiting for the outer world to give you a reason to feel grateful. You become grateful now, and in doing so you call into form the experiences, conditions, and relationships that correspond to that gratitude. When you practice gratitude from the end, thanking life for what you have already received in the unseen, you shift your state of being. You move from the vibration of lack and longing into the vibration of completion. This shift is not theoretical but energetic, and consciousness being the only cause, that energetic state must be mirrored back to you. Every moment of true gratitude is a moment of creative power. It is not a passive emotion but an active declaration of identity. You are saying, "I already have it, I already am it." In this way, gratitude becomes the language of creation, speaking directly to the subconscious in a way that reason and effort cannot. This is why gratitude can transform circumstances more powerfully than worry, force, or resistance. Where resistance tightens and delays, gratitude softens and allows. Where fear pushes away the desired state, gratitude draws it near. It opens the heart and calms the mind, creating space for the new to enter. It suspends the need to control and replaces it with trust. You begin to live as though the desire is already realized, and from that living the world begins to reflect back to you the forms that match your feeling. Gratitude thus becomes not only a response to life but a tool to shape it. To embody this principle is to infuse gratitude into every aspect of your inner world. You become thankful for the answered prayer before it shows up, for the healing before the symptoms vanish, for the opportunity before the door opens. You speak words of thanks in the silence of your own mind and feel the warmth of appreciation in your chest even when nothing has changed around you. This inner state becomes your home, your resting place, your dwelling. You return to it again and again, not because you are trying to force manifestation, but because you are choosing to live from a higher truth, the truth that what you seek is already yours. Gratitude also dissolves the illusion of separation. When you are truly grateful, you are not in want. You are not reaching, striving, or lacking. You are one with your desire, and in that unity all fear dissolves. Gratitude is the recognition that you and your desire are not apart, but already joined in consciousness. This joining is the seed of manifestation. When you live from this place, the need for struggle falls away. You are no longer trying to become something, you are simply being that which you already are. And because the world is always a mirror, it must show you more of what you are being. Practicing gratitude in this way does not require perfect conditions or ideal circumstances. It is most powerful when practiced in the midst of contrast. When you can be thankful in the face of challenge, you are declaring that the inner truth outweighs the outer appearance. You are refusing to let the temporary dictate the eternal. You are anchoring yourself in the unseen and calling forth a new reality. The more consistently you can hold this state, the more your life begins to shift around you. Gratitude becomes your atmosphere, and your world rearranges itself to match it. It is also worth understanding that gratitude must be felt, not merely spoken. The words carry little weight if they are empty of emotion. But when the feeling of gratitude rises up naturally within, it changes the texture of your entire being. You walk differently, speak differently, think differently. You become a magnet to good, because your vibration is one of abundance and joy. This energy is unmistakable, and it influences everything around you. Others respond to it, life responds to it, and the path ahead begins to open effortlessly. In moments of doubt, you can return to gratitude as a compass. It centers you, grounds you, and reminds you of who you truly are. It brings your focus away from what appears to be missing, and back to the truth of what is already present. And when you focus on what is present in imagination and spirit, rather than what is absent in form, you feed the very state you wish to grow. Gratitude thus becomes the soil in which all desires take root. It is the silent partner of imagination, the natural companion to feeling, and the final seal of assumption. In the silence of your inner world lies the blueprint of your life. And every moment you dwell in the feeling of your fulfilled desire, you are writing that blueprint anew. There is no fate outside of your consciousness, no destiny apart from the states you choose to occupy. The law of conscious creation does not demand effort, sacrifice, or struggle. It requires only that you take responsibility for your inner conversations, that you persist in your assumptions, that you use your imagination boldly, and that you give thanks before you see. Nothing happens by accident. Every event, every meeting, every success or setback is drawn to you by the invisible hand of your inner state. The power to change your world is not in what you do, but in what you are. Be still. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and let the law work. The world rearranges itself around your sustained belief. You are the operant power. You are the creator. And what you dare to imagine as true will become your experience. There is no accident in your being here at this very moment. You are not listening by chance, but by divine appointment. The world you see around you is but a reflection of the world within you. If you would dare to believe, truly believe, then what now seems impossible will soon become inevitable. Miracles are not events sent from afar. They are born in the womb of your own consciousness. This message is not about hope. Hope waits. This is about certainty. For what you accept as true inwardly must express itself outwardly. The surprise that is coming is already forming itself in the unseen, and it is waiting only for your agreement, your inner consent. Life is ready to astonish you. The door is about to open, not because of fate or fortune, but because you are awakening to who you truly are. So now, gently but firmly, remove the veil of doubt. Quiet the noise of fear. And know this, your Father knows what you need before you even ask. And the moment you claim it as already yours, the heavens will conspire to bring it forth. The power of inner assumption lies in the recognition that your inner world is the origin of your external experiences. What you accept as true within yourself, what you consistently dwell upon in imagination and feeling, begins to take shape in the world around you. The outer world is not independent of the inner man, it is the expression of him. Life in all its forms bends to the assumptions you hold most deeply, whether you realize it or not. Every event, every encounter, every breakthrough or delay carries the echo of your persistent inner state. To assume a thing is to accept it as fact now, not in some distant future, but in this very moment of awareness. It is not wishful thinking or idle dreaming, but a deliberate acceptance of a new reality, even while the senses scream otherwise. Assumption is the substance from which faith operates. It is not merely thinking positively or hoping for the best, it is the quiet, unwavering confidence that what you have imagined is already so. The world will respond not to what you want or need, but to what you believe yourself to already be. If you wish to experience abundance, peace, healing, or restoration, then assume those qualities within. Let them become natural to your inner speech and feeling. Let them shape the way you walk, the tone of your voice, the thoughts you entertain in solitude. The universe is not deciding what to give you. It is simply reflecting what you have already claimed inwardly. To harness the power of assumption, one must move beyond begging or pleading for change. The divine does not require persuasion. What it responds to is alignment. The one who assumes already has, and therefore does not strive or grasp. This is the mystery that many overlook. By assuming the end is already fulfilled, you move in harmony with the law of consciousness. You are not trying to create something from nothing. You are awakening to the truth that all things already exist in the unseen and are brought forth by your awareness of them. When you assume, you shift the focus from lack to possession, from fear to fulfillment. You are no longer a seeker, but a finder. There is a sacred power in imagining yourself already at the place you desire to be. Not imagining the process, or the struggle or the delay, but the end itself. The feeling of having it. The restfulness that comes when the prayer has already been answered. And this assumption, held consistently and confidently, begins to weave itself into your reality in ways that often appear miraculous. Life reorganizes itself around your dominant state of being. You do not force the outcome. You live from it. You speak from it. You respond to the world around you not as someone who is waiting, but as someone who has already received. Most people assume the worst without knowing they are doing it. They imagine failure, rejection, loss, and difficulty, and life faithfully mirrors these unconscious assumptions. The principle works regardless of what you assume because it is impersonal. The power is always active, but it responds to the direction you give it. When you become conscious of what you are assuming about yourself, others, and the future, you begin to take control of the creative process. You are no longer a victim of circumstances, but the initiator of change. This is not self-deception. It is the recognition that the inner man governs the outer world. You are not bound by appearances, because appearances are simply the result of former assumptions. To practice assumption means to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You imagine scenes that imply your desire is already realized. You persist in this inner knowing even when there is no outer confirmation. You return to it again and again, not anxiously but confidently, knowing that assumption has creative power. In time, what was once only an image in your mind becomes the tangible reality you walk through. Others will call it coincidence or luck or fate, but you will know that it came by inner vision and faith. Assumption shapes destiny. It is the master key to change. You do not need to know how it will happen. The how belongs to a higher order. Your role is to accept the end as real now, to assume the identity of the one who already has what they once longed for. You are not pretending. You are aligning. The moment you accept this principle, everything in your life begins to shift. The people, places, and conditions necessary for your assumption to manifest begin to move toward you. But even before they appear, you are changed. You walk differently. You speak with authority. You radiate peace. The outer miracle begins with an inward decision to assume that it is already done. Faith is the invisible bridge between the seen and the unseen. It is not based on evidence of the senses, nor does it wait for confirmation before it acts. Faith is the conviction that what you have imagined, what you have felt deeply within, is already yours, long before the world reflects it. It is the unseen substance that gives form to your inner assumptions. The world may call it foolishness or delusion, but faith does not concern itself with appearances. It moves with quiet certainty, knowing that reality begins not with what is visible but with what is believed. The man of faith does not ask if it is possible. He knows it already is, and walks forward as though the promise were already fulfilled. He does not beg or plead for change because he lives from the place where change has already occurred. Faith does not look to the clock or the calendar. It is not moved by delay, nor is it shaken by the silence of waiting. There is a realm that exists beyond the senses, and it is there that true creation begins. Every structure, invention, and breakthrough began first in the invisible. Faith operates within this space. It is the power that lifts the mind above limitation and anchors the soul in divine assurance. It allows a man to stand in the midst of lack and see abundance, to face sickness and feel health, to endure rejection and know acceptance. It is not imagination divorced from truth. It is truth birthed in imagination. The world, bound by logic and facts, may resist this principle, but the soul that has awakened knows better. Faith is not weakness, it is strength. It does not tremble in the storm, it walks on water. It does not deny reality, it rewrites it from the inside out. Every person lives by faith, though few are aware of it. Each moment you act, speak, or expect something, you are exercising belief in something not yet seen. Whether you expect the worst or the best, you are placing your trust in a future not yet visible. The difference lies in where your faith is placed. Some place faith in fear, in patterns of pain and disappointment, and they receive according to their belief. But those who direct faith toward the unseen promises of a higher reality walk in a different kind of power. They become immune to circumstances, not because they ignore them, but because they have trained their inner eye to see beyond them. They have learned that what they feel is true within themselves must eventually find expression without. They no longer seek signs, they become the sign. Faith is the movement of awareness toward a reality not yet visible to others. It sees the world as already changed and invites it to catch up. It chooses to dwell in the feeling of what is desired, not because the evidence supports it, but because truth does not depend on approval. This kind of faith is not born from trying harder, but from yielding more deeply to what already is. It is a surrender to divine order, a submission to the invisible wisdom that governs all things. The moment you believe with your whole being that you are already what you seek to become, that belief becomes the seed from which your future grows. And that seed, watered by persistent faith, becomes a harvest of transformation. To live by faith is to break free from the tyranny of logic and the prison of past experiences. The mind may protest, listing every reason why it cannot be, but faith moves anyway. Faith speaks the language of completion. It says it is done, while the senses insist it has not even begun. Yet that declaration carries power. Words spoken in faith are not mere sounds, they are commands to the unseen to take form. They are declarations that draw the future into the present. Even when nothing around you supports the vision, faith continues to act as though it were already true. It does not retreat. It does not explain itself. It does not ask for permission. It moves boldly because it has seen what others have not yet seen, and felt what others have not yet dared to feel. Faith never waits for evidence because it is the evidence. It is the internal witness of what is coming into being. It does not look for reassurance. It offers it. When the world says, "Show me and I'll believe," faith replies, "Believe and you will see." This is the law of all creation. You are not a passive observer of life. You are a creator through your belief. When you step into faith, you align yourself with the divine creative process. You step out of the shadows of doubt and walk into the light of fulfilled vision. This is how miracles happen, not by striving but by knowing, not by hoping but by assuming the end. And once that inner certainty is formed, nothing can stop it. The path may wind and the timing may stretch, but the outcome is already set, not by chance but by the firmness of your faith. The law of conscious manifestation is the understanding that life is not happening to you by random chance, but through the focused activity of your awareness. Every condition, event, and relationship you experience is the product of your inner state, what you consistently accept, imagine, and feel to be true. You are not merely a spectator of your life, reacting to what unfolds. You are the author, consciously or unconsciously writing the story through your assumptions and beliefs. The outer world is a mirror, faithfully reflecting the dominant patterns of your inner world. Whether you realize it or not, you are always manifesting, always creating. The difference between unconscious and conscious manifestation is the choice to take responsibility for that creative power and direct it deliberately toward the life you desire to live. Conscious manifestation begins with the realization that imagination is not idle fantasy. It is the tool by which you shape the unseen substance of life into visible form. When you imagine something vividly and emotionally, and persist in that state, you give birth to it. The law does not respond to fleeting thoughts or passive wishes. It responds to what you claim as real within yourself. If you continue to see yourself as unworthy, broken, or helpless, the world will reinforce that image. But if you begin to assume yourself whole, empowered, and favored, the world must eventually reflect that too. This is not arrogance or delusion. It is alignment with the law that governs reality. What you feel to be true of yourself, life confirms. Manifestation does not begin with effort but with awareness. The moment you become aware of the connection between your inner conversations and your external experiences, you begin to step into mastery. Most people live in a state of unconscious reaction, replaying the same stories of limitation, fear, and lack, and wondering why nothing changes. But when you realize that these stories are not facts, they are choices, you gain the power to write something new. You are not bound by your past unless you choose to carry it forward in imagination. You are not a slave to external conditions because conditions are not causes, they are effects. The true cause of your experience is always within. To manifest consciously is to live from the end. To dwell in the feeling that your desire is already fulfilled. You do not wait for evidence before you believe. You believe and then the evidence comes. The law is precise, but it is not mechanical. It works through emotion, through imagination, through the energy of conviction. If you desire healing, you do not visualize the healing process or worry about how it will unfold. You imagine yourself well. You feel the relief, the freedom, the vitality. You dwell in that state so completely that your body begins to respond. Your circumstances begin to shift, and people around you begin to treat you according to your new vibration. The change does not come from trying to force reality. It comes from changing your inner self-concept and allowing reality to align with it. This law is not about manipulating outcomes or controlling others. It is about aligning yourself with what is already true in the realm of possibility. Every potential already exists. You do not create it from scratch. You choose it. The version of you who has already achieved what you seek is real, and you reach it by embodying its mindset, its emotions, its assumptions. You stop asking if it will happen, and you start living as if it has. This inner shift is subtle but powerful. It breaks the cycle of waiting and puts you into a state of receiving. When you manifest from this place, you are no longer grasping at life. You are allowing life to meet you where you already are in consciousness. Consistency is the key. The law does not respond to moments of excitement or occasional declarations. It responds to persistent identity. What you return to again and again in thought and feeling becomes the structure of your life. This is why it is vital to guard your inner conversations, to become mindful of the stories you are telling yourself throughout the day. Are you imagining defeat, rejection, and struggle, or are you dwelling in images of success, love, and peace? Your life will answer that question, not with words but with results. You can only experience what you have inwardly accepted as possible for you, not just intellectually but emotionally and spiritually. To manifest consciously requires trust in the unseen and a willingness to let go of the need to control the process. You are not the one making the manifestation happen. You are the one allowing it to happen by remaining faithful to the state of already having it. There is a higher intelligence, a divine order that responds to your inner stance. When you surrender to that flow, when you release the tension of needing and step into the freedom of having, everything around you begins to cooperate with your vision. Opportunities arise, people show up, and what once seemed distant becomes undeniable. The law is always working, always responding, and when you learn to work with it consciously, you begin to see that nothing is impossible. Everything begins within. Everything begins with what you dare to believe. Silencing doubt and expecting the miracle is not an act of willpower, but an inner shift in perception, where you choose to no longer entertain the voice of fear that insists you must see before you believe. Doubt is the resistance that stands between the desire and its fulfillment, not because it has power of its own, but because it takes your attention away from the reality you are creating within. Every time you doubt, you are reinforcing the very condition you long to change. Doubt speaks the language of delay and separation. It says, what if it doesn't happen? What if I'm not enough? What if I'm only imagining all of this and nothing will ever change? These are not innocent questions. They are subtle agreements with the opposite of your desire. They keep you anchored in a state where miracles remain concepts instead of lived experiences. To silence doubt is to cease arguing with your own potential. It is to quiet the mental chatter that demands guarantees, evidence, and confirmation before it will believe. But miracles do not arise from conditions. They arise from consciousness. They are not rewards given to the deserving, but natural results of aligning your inner state with divine truth. The moment you stop looking outside for signs and start living from the inner knowing that it is already done, you move into the atmosphere where miracles unfold. This is not denial, it is authority. You no longer grant doubt the right to speak louder than your vision. You no longer allow fear to define what is possible for you. You become the keeper of your own vibration, the guardian of your own belief, and in doing so you make space for the miraculous. Expectation is the emotional blueprint that tells the universe what to build. It is the soil in which the seeds of your imagination take root and grow. If you expect disappointment, it will arrive right on time. If you expect breakthrough, it will find you in ways you could never have planned. Expectation is not passive hoping. It is an active claiming of what is already yours. It is the energy you carry when you walk into a room, the tone of your voice, the thoughts that meet you when you wake. It says, I know who I am. I know what I carry. I know what's coming to me, even if no one else can see it yet. When you expect the miracle, you remove the question mark from your desire. You stop asking if it will come and start living in the certainty that it must. The mind often demands logical explanations and visible evidence, but the soul operates differently. It knows by feeling, by intuition, by inner resonance. When you are expecting a miracle, you are not waiting idly, you are preparing internally. You are expanding your capacity to receive. You are aligning every part of your being with the frequency of the outcome you've already seen in imagination. You are becoming the version of yourself who already lives in the fulfillment of the thing desired. That inner transformation is not just symbolic, it is creative. The moment you fully inhabit that state, the world begins to shift around you. Conditions bend, delays dissolve, and things begin to unfold with a sense of divine orchestration. But doubt is always waiting at the door, disguised as realism, caution, or humility. It whispers that expecting too much will lead to disappointment, that miracles are for others, that your desires are too big, too bold, or too far gone. Doubt plays on past failures and rehearses worst-case scenarios. It feeds on delay and grows stronger in silence. To silence it is to stop feeding it, to withdraw your energy from the story it tells and invest it instead in the new reality you are creating. You do not fight doubt by arguing with it, you disarm it by no longer believing it. You turn your attention inward, return to the vision, feel the joy of already having, and allow that feeling to become your new normal. The miracle does not come because you begged hard enough or waited long enough. It comes because you became the person who could receive it. It comes because you expected it, prepared for it, and made a place for it in your consciousness. It comes because you refused to entertain the lie that said it couldn't. When you dwell in the feeling of expectancy, you are no longer questioning, no longer analyzing, you are knowing. And that knowing becomes the vibration that calls the invisible into form. Others may not understand how or why it happened, but you will know it was always in motion, always waiting for your agreement, always ready to meet you the moment you chose to believe. When you release the grip of doubt, you return to the natural state of faith that every child knows instinctively. You return to the deep trust that says life is for you, not against you. That the desires in your heart are not accidents, but blueprints. That the invisible is more real than the seen. Expectation becomes your resting place, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've stopped needing to. You have chosen belief over worry, vision over fear, and in doing so you have made yourself ready for the miracle to arrive in the perfect way, at the perfect time, without resistance, without hesitation, and without delay. Living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the key that unlocks the hidden doors of manifestation. It is the state in which the imagined desire becomes your internal reality long before any external sign appears. It is not about merely thinking positively or daydreaming about what could be, but about embodying the emotional and psychological atmosphere of already having it. The inner world becomes more real than the outer, and what you feel within yourself begins to override what you see with your eyes. This principle does not operate according to the rules of the senses, but according to the laws of consciousness. When you live in the end result, you begin to mold your thoughts, behaviors, and vibrations to match what is already yours, and by doing so you summon the unseen into the seen. The feeling is the secret, because it is the language of the subconscious mind, and the subconscious creates reality without question or hesitation. It does not respond to the words you speak or the logic you use, but to the feelings you embody. If you feel like someone who is still waiting, still lacking, still unsure, the subconscious takes that as a command and reproduces conditions to match it. But when you feel the joy, peace, and gratitude of already receiving, even if nothing around you reflects it yet, you are planting seeds in the soil of the unseen, seeds that must grow into form. This is the power of assumption. You assume not with the mind but with the heart. You claim with emotion. You become one with the desired state and refuse to step out of it. To live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to move as though the miracle has already occurred. You no longer ask for signs because you are the sign. You no longer look to circumstances to validate your desire, because your inner world has already made it true. You walk differently, speak differently, carry yourself with a new energy, not because you're pretending, but because you've shifted your center of identity. You are no longer chasing the outcome, you are aligning with it. There is no striving, no desperation, only quiet certainty. You are no longer trying to get to the destination, you are living from it. This is the sacred reversal that changes everything. The external world becomes the echo, not the source. The cause is within, the effect is without. This practice requires discipline, not in the form of rigid control, but in consistent awareness. Each time you are tempted to return to the old feeling of lack or doubt, you gently redirect your focus to the state of fulfillment. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, and remember who you are. You recall the feeling of being loved, healed, abundant, chosen, whatever your heart longs for, and you let that feeling saturate your being. You do not wait for the world to give you a reason to feel it. You create the reason from within. This is the life of the one who manifests consciously. He no longer waits to see, he feels to see, and in time the world must mirror that internal reality with absolute precision. Living in the end means your emotional reactions begin to change. You no longer fear setbacks or delays, because you know they cannot alter the final outcome. You've already seen the end in your imagination, and you know it is done. You begin to carry a calm confidence, a peace that passes understanding. Others may not grasp it, but they will feel it. They will notice that something in you is anchored, steady, unmoved. You are no longer subject to the chaos around you, because you have found your home in the reality within you. And this inner home, this inner conviction, becomes the point of attraction through which all good flows. The world around you may continue to look the same for a time, but that no longer bothers you. You are not measuring progress by appearances. You are measuring it by your ability to remain faithful to the feeling. You know that what you feel consistently must be made manifest. You have stopped pleading and started assuming. You have stopped waiting and started embodying. You are no longer the one in search of transformation. You are the one who has already been transformed. And from this state, life begins to move in harmony with your inner vision. Each moment becomes an opportunity to practice this awareness. When faced with challenges, you do not respond as the old self would. You respond as the fulfilled self. You ask, how would I feel if it were already done? And then you choose to feel that now. You train your inner responses to reflect the reality you desire, not the one that appears before you. You refuse to be a slave to appearances. You recognize them as temporary shadows cast by old beliefs, and you gently turn back to the light of your new identity. You know that to feel it now is to live it soon, and so you make your home in the end result. You breathe it, think it, walk in it, and dwell in it as though it were your only truth. And in doing so, you call it forth into this world with power and certainty. Persistence in faith is the silent force that moves mountains in the unseen world. It is the unwavering stand you take when everything outside contradicts what you've already claimed within. It is the quiet refusal to give up, the decision to remain in the knowing of fulfillment despite the absence of evidence. This kind of faith is not loud, not desperate, and not emotional. It is still, steady, and unshakable. It doesn't depend on circumstances, timing, or validation from others. It flows from the conviction that what you've seen and felt in imagination is already real, already yours, and already in motion. While the world might measure belief by visible results, true faith measures belief by inner alignment. To persist in faith is to live with the absolute assurance that the unseen is more real than what the senses report, and it is only a matter of time before the invisible becomes visible. In the process of conscious creation, delay is often mistaken for denial, but delay is merely the time it takes for the outer world to conform to the inner shift. Faith does not demand instant proof, because it understands that reality reorganizes itself in response to your dominant state of consciousness. The moment you assume something to be true and feel it is done, a process begins that cannot be seen with the eyes but can be felt with the heart. Persistence keeps you in alignment with that process. Without persistence, the mind will wander, doubts will creep in, and emotions will fluctuate based on what is or isn't happening externally. But when you persist in faith, you stay rooted in the end result. You make your inner world more stable than the outer, and that stability becomes your power. Persistence is not trying harder or repeating affirmations with strained effort. It is returning to the feeling of the fulfilled desire again and again, until it becomes second nature. It is choosing to think, feel, and act as the person who already has what they want. You might be tempted to give attention to current conditions or to talk about how long it's taking, but persistence redirects your focus. It gently but firmly says, "No, I know what I've seen. I know what I've accepted. I know it is mine." You do not need to force belief, you just need to keep returning to it. Each time you choose faith over fear, conviction over confusion, and gratitude over complaint, you are strengthening your connection to the unseen fulfillment. There will be moments when you feel discouraged, when your senses scream the opposite of what you're believing for. You may face delays, disappointments, and even ridicule. But the test is not in the delay. The test is in your response to the delay. Will you waver and fall back into doubt, or will you stand still and know that the vision is already accomplished? To persist in faith is to train yourself to remain emotionally unmoved by appearances. It is to adopt a higher perspective that recognizes the physical world as the echo of inner assumptions. And when you've truly assumed something is real within, persistence becomes your natural state. You are not holding on for dear life. You are resting in the reality that already exists in consciousness. Persistence does not mean you never have moments of weakness. It means you don't stay there. When fear or doubt arises, you don't condemn yourself. You simply return. You close your eyes, breathe, and reconnect with the feeling of already having. This is not a rigid discipline, but a loving devotion to your inner truth. The more often you return to that truth, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, the state of faith becomes your home. You live there. You respond from there. You plan from there. And life begins to organize itself in miraculous ways around that unwavering inner posture. This kind of faith is not rooted in logic. It is rooted in intimacy with the unseen. You have communed with the end. You have tasted the joy of fulfillment in your imagination. And you have decided to make that your dwelling place. No matter what challenges arise, no matter how long it takes, you do not shift. You may feel things, but you do not surrender your vision to temporary emotions. You know that the law is faithful, that imagination creates reality, and that what you persist in feeling must become your experience. You do not need to convince others, explain yourself, or seek reassurance. Your confidence is not performative. It is quiet, strong, and rooted in knowing. Persistence in faith is the difference between wishing and creating. Anyone can wish for change, but only those who persist in the feeling of the fulfilled desire see that change take form. It is easy to start strong and give up when nothing happens quickly. But true creators are those who remain faithful until the world has no choice but to conform. They do not lower their expectations to match circumstances. They hold their inner standard until circumstances rise to meet it. And this unwavering posture is not born from striving but from surrender. It is a surrender to the truth that the end is already accomplished, and all that remains is for the world to catch up. This path requires courage. The courage to believe without seeing, to act without confirmation, and to feel joy in the absence of results. It requires patience, not passive waiting, but active, conscious alignment. It demands that you place more trust in your inner vision than in your outer history. And in time it rewards that trust in ways so beautiful and precise that you realize it was never a matter of if, it was always a matter of when. Gratitude before manifestation is one of the most powerful states a person can occupy, because it declares that what is desired is already received. It is not a performance or a manipulation to get what you want. It is the natural expression of inner certainty. When you give thanks in advance, you are not begging for a future outcome. You are recognizing a present reality that has not yet appeared to the physical senses. This is not wishful thinking, but alignment with the spiritual truth that all things are finished in consciousness. The act of gratitude affirms that you have already touched, received, and lived the fulfillment within, and now you are simply allowing it to unfold externally in its perfect timing and form. It removes resistance, accelerates alignment, and elevates your entire vibration into harmony with the very thing you long for. True gratitude is not circumstantial. It is not dependent on life going according to plan. It is not something you offer only after the answer comes. Gratitude is a spiritual stance, a posture of heart, a frequency that says, I trust the unseen more than what I see. I believe the invisible more than what is visible. It reflects the understanding that everything is working together for your good, even when it appears otherwise. Gratitude says, I know the miracle is already mine, even if the delivery hasn't arrived yet. It shifts your awareness from lack to sufficiency, from longing to possession, from hoping to knowing. And when you dwell in that frequency consistently, you begin to magnetize the very fulfillment you're grateful for. When you feel gratitude before the manifestation, you are walking in faith that has substance. You are not waiting for something to happen to feel blessed. You feel blessed because you know it already has happened in the unseen. You close your eyes, enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and give thanks as though the answer has already arrived, because in spirit it has. This thankfulness is not forced or mechanical. It flows effortlessly from the inner conviction that the end is certain. And the more sincerely you feel this gratitude, the faster the physical world begins to shift. You no longer carry the vibration of waiting or wanting. You carry the vibration of completion, of satisfaction, of fulfilled desire, and the law of consciousness must reflect that state in experience. Gratitude also softens the heart and opens the mind to receive. It removes the tension of striving and struggling and replaces it with peace and confidence. When you are thankful, you are no longer trying to get, you are preparing to hold. You are not questioning whether or not the blessing will come. You are preparing your hands to catch it. Gratitude clears the static from your inner atmosphere and makes your awareness a landing ground for answered prayer. It transforms how you see the present moment, because you are no longer judging it as incomplete. You recognize it as part of the perfect unfolding of what you have already received spiritually. And that awareness, that state of thank you, becomes the very energy that allows the unseen to become seen. It is a mystery to the logical mind that you would give thanks for something you don't yet possess. But the spiritual mind knows that possession begins within. If you possess it in feeling, you possess it in essence, and the form must follow. Gratitude in advance is a testimony to your inner work. It is the signature of someone who understands how reality is shaped, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The world mirrors what you are being, not what you are needing. And when you are being someone who already has, already is, already lives in the blessing, your outer life must catch up to that state of being. Giving thanks before the breakthrough is not delusion, it is divine intelligence. Gratitude also keeps your mind and heart from drifting into the vibration of lack. When you are truly thankful, you cannot simultaneously feel anxious, doubtful, or unworthy. Gratitude disarms fear. It neutralizes complaint. It extinguishes the fires of impatience and comparison. It turns your attention away from what you think is missing and centers you in the abundance that is already here, even if not yet in physical form. It is not just about thanking for the thing you desire. It's about thanking for the growth, the unseen progress, the spiritual alignment, and the divine timing that is always working on your behalf. You begin to see even the delays and challenges as gifts wrapped in disguise, moving you closer to the thing you've imagined with faith. In this state, you stop counting how many days have passed, how long you've waited, how far you think you still are. Instead, you begin to celebrate the fact that you've already arrived within. And when you live from that inner arrival, the outer arrival becomes inevitable. Gratitude becomes your dwelling place, not because everything is perfect, but because you know perfection is unfolding through every imperfect appearance. You begin to find joy not just in the arrival, but in the anticipation, in the faithfulness, in the knowing that every moment is a step into the reality you've already claimed. And that deep, quiet joy is the most fertile ground for miracles. When you learn to live from the end, to embody the feeling of your wish fulfilled, to persist in faith despite appearances, and to give thanks before anything changes, you no longer walk as a seeker, you walk as one who has already found. The power to create, to manifest, to receive miracles has never been outside of you. It has always been within, waiting for you to remember your divine authority, to assume the state of your desire, and to remain faithful to it without wavering. Life begins to respond not to what you ask for, but to who you are being. And when you choose to be the person who already has, already is, already knows, then the world must shift to mirror that truth. Miracles are not coming, they are already yours. The moment you accept them within, you open the way for life to surprise you in ways that leave no doubt. You were never waiting, you were always creating.